Hi, welcome back. Welcome back to Gay Boy Vlogs. I have an interesting topic, but I'm gonna be upfront about it. This episode is gonna be about being horny. The next episode probably as well, because I have a lot to say. There is a lot to say. And if that's not for you, that's fine. But maybe you need to look into yourself and wonder, how far down the Christian puritanical path have I fallen if a trans person talking about sex makes me uncomfortable? Then again, if you're a conservative who has found this channel, welcome. However, for those who want to create a authentic reconnection with their sexuality, you stay right where you are. So, the reason I want to talk about horniness, or sexuality and sensuality, is not just because I am a horny person, but also because on a more societal level, I feel like there's interesting things going on that are not necessarily always good. And I think this episode I will use the time to mostly talk about my own personal journey with rediscovering my sexuality. And in the next episode, I will go into large-scale patterns of sexuality that have been happening that I think are interesting to discuss. Now, something interesting that friends that I've made recently tell me a lot is that I seem very open and relaxed and confident in my sexuality. They would even go as far to say that I am a casually horny guy who flirts a lot. That is very recent. That is a very recent development. I was as late as last year, November, so last year around this time, grappling in group therapy, and group therapy is not the best session for this, with how truly sexually repressed I really was. Because last year I decided to confront a lot of the things that before then I found too difficult or too hard to confront, such as my transition. But this one, me finding sexuality and sensuality a very important core value of who I was, also came up a lot. And it wasn't that I was afraid of sex or that I was sexually repressed to the point that I wouldn't want to talk about it or wouldn't want to have sex. It was more that there was at the core still a deep shame and a deep idea of I am not allowed to like sexuality and sensuality as much as I do because arbitrary social rules, because I will get in trouble, because my profession as a teacher inhibited me to do so. And the more I started to look into this, the more I found that you can get sexually repressed in a lot of ways. And I feel like if you're out of contact with your sexuality, sometimes you don't even notice. But really feeling authentically connected to sexuality is very difficult for a lot of people. And for a lot of people who follow a very heteronormative scheme of sex, they have a script to go off, like how most heteronormative people have the script of man loves woman, woman loves man, penis goes in vagina. But as soon as you break away from that script, for example, by being queer or coming out as trans, you have to face that there are other options too.
and that there's a whole world out there, and that somewhere in there, your real sense of self can find expression. And that's a lot tougher than just putting penis in vagina. Now, personally, I don't think sexual repression for me had a lot to do with my upbringing as a kid. My parents were pretty progressive. My mom watched Sex and the City with us. I wouldn't say that that's the best example. Again, very heteronormative. But at least there was this sense of, around the time that me and my sibling became teenagers, so like, yeah, we expect you guys to be jorking it, and we're okay with that. And that was nice. Apart from that, we never really talked about sex. It was never really a discussed topic. And as a young impressionable teenager, I spent much more time in the classroom with my peers, who were all really like giggly and sex averse and like, ugh, why would you want to be Samantha from Sex and the City? She's gross. I want to claim, by the way, that I do not endorse this statement. I think Samantha from Sex and the City is actually the best character. She's the most representative, I think, of gay male sexuality. I mean, the show is written by a gay dude, so that explains a lot.
I love a big dick. I love it inside of me. I love looking at it. I love everything about it.
So my time as a teenager was also not spent feeling very comfortable about sexuality. And I did know deep down that I was a very sexual person. But because I was also a child of the internet, it became very easy to separate my authentic self, let's just say, who was interested in sexual topics, and my presented self. Because you can easily put things on the internet, don't look at it, and don't worry about it, and then present yourself offline in a way that you think you need to present in order to be accepted by your peers. But when you do that at a really young age, you teach yourself that that's the norm, and chances are that you take that with you to your life as a young adult, and then you still don't know how to sexually express yourself. And I had sort of the fortunate and unfortunate journey that around my 20s, I started hanging out with gay men, and they're very open about sexuality. Unfortunate part was that it was 10 years ago, around 2015, and I was not out as a trans man yet. Rather, I was a very cute, feminine, girly girl. And spaces were just not as queer. I can tell you that the men that I hung out with were very adamant that they did not like girls. And even if I had been out as a trans man around the time, I have a feeling that even then I wouldn't have been very sexually welcome. God, were there a lot of adventures where I stood on the sideline, I just got to watch, sort of, which is weird, I guess. But it really made me internalize as a young adult, like, okay, everyone, especially gay men, are allowed to have sex. Absolutely. Just not me. And unfortunately, I took that notion subconsciously with me to a lot of the relationships later that I had as a young adult. Because I would date people that were not necessarily very sexually active, and then when I really craved sexual attention or sensuality and I was told no, I was like, oh my god, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve sexual attention. Obviously something is wrong with me for wanting a normal human thing, because these people, they don't want it, so I must be in the wrong. And if that keeps being repeated over and over, you're probably gonna build some kind of trauma scheme in your thinking of like, okay, well, if this is not allowed, I guess it's bad. I guess I'm not supposed to be wanting this. It's not just me having an unfortunate amount of rejection earlier in my young adult life. I feel also like, especially as someone who identified as a girl 10 years ago, sexuality was just not that talked about. Like, it's great that nowadays we do talk about it more and people take initiative to really highlight that female orgasms are a thing. But I remember distinctly that in my biology book as a teenager, the boner was described as a normal thing and that boys didn't have to be ashamed about it. But there was nothing about, like, if your pussy wet, that's fine. Don't worry about it, girl. And it made me so mad. And still, I'm kind of like, I do know we live in a different time. A lot has happened and can happen in 10 years. And I'm very grateful, for example, that a lot of the gay men that I hang out with now are knowledgeable about trans men and cool about them. Not gonna lie, partially due to porn. And that's nice, you know? That does make me feel like a more accepted part of the community. That did make me accept me as a hornier man a little bit more. But I did have to sit for a long time apart from the fact that, you know, my sexuality wasn't weird or strange. I did have to sit with the fact like, oh, I'm gonna transition to become a man, and I was already horny, so now I'm gonna be a horny little man. I found that extremely difficult. I found that, like, because in broader senses, horny men are seen as the bad guy, as the predator. And of course, that doesn't mean that every horny guy will be seen as one. But I, as a trans dude, was super afraid that that was how I was gonna be known. So for a large chunk of time last year, when I started my transition, I was very shy about the fact that I found people attractive, because I thought that that made me gross. I really did think like I'm not supposed to be having these feelings because that makes me predatory in some way. And I think a lot of trans people deal with this because of the stigma, not just against masculinity and sexuality, but also just sexuality and transness that is held. But I can promise you now, especially trans masks watching this, I can promise you there are many, many, many people out there, regardless of gender, who will be into you as a horny little man. I have found many bisexual women, even lesbians, who think that I am endearing, even though I'm such a naughty little guy, you know? And of course, the fact that I am a trans person and a largely empathetic person first, before that I am a man, helps a lot. As I came out of this sort of like, oh my god, I can't believe I'm trans and I'm also horny, and I had a really funny conversation with the therapist that gave me my diagnosis at the time. Because everyone knew I was trans, but you still need to get a diagnosis if you want specific healthcare. And she asked me, so, what's your libido like? And what is it like on hormones? I tried to be really coy. And told her, well, it's always been quite naturally high. And on testosterone, it's even higher. When I tell you, this woman just turns to me and goes like, so you just walk around like a horny bear all day. I love that therapist. No complaints here, but I guess that for some people that could be offsetting. But I thought that was hilarious. A friend made a remark that only other horny people would make a remark like that, so I probably had something with her in common. As a young adult, I also had a very hard time making distinctions between different types of horny. And I think it's actually quite healthy to sort of be aware of what kind of horny and what kind of craving you have, because then you can supply yourself better with what you might need. And I like to make the distinction of physical horny, just kind of like a hungry. You just feel really like, oh, I feel so sensitive in my body and it just needs to do something with it. Mentally horny, you're just horny on the brain. Personally, as a writer and a creative, I can really attest that, you know, your brain is the biggest stimulant in sex most of the time. And physical horny for other people, which is when there's just someone really attractive in front of you and you just feel very like, oh, your presence alone makes me horny. And I feel, as someone who was very non-confrontational the last 10 years, I feel like I only ever really, you know, got a taste of the first two because I had a high libido, so I was physically horny and I was mentally horny, but I wasn't necessarily looking out for the people that I was really attracted to. Instead, people would approach me and I would be like, okay, sure. And I think also over the past year, I've come to the conclusion that even though I have an extremely is maybe a big word, but even though I have a high libido, I am very much demisexual. I only find people very attractive if I have some kind of rapport with them and if they are my type. And still then, it very rarely happens. Like, I'm very lucky right now that I know some really nice people that make me very horny, but in general, I just like, I'm horny and I guess we can do something about it. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, because I do think sex can be enjoyed on a casual level as long as you trust someone. That's kind of the reason I'm making these episodes specifically, is because I think sex should be a more normal thing that we share as humans who have a connection. I do think on a larger scale in society, we're treating sex again too much like a puritanical thing that only happens between man and woman when they're the ones for each other. But I will dive into that later. For now, I just want to tell those who want to reconnect with their authentic sexuality, and they don't know where to start, that it's always a good thing to tell someone that you find this difficult. And I remember when I had the therapy intake and I was surrounded by like very prom and proper women, mostly above the age of 50, and I just wanted to yell, I'm a huge slut, but I didn't dare to. I eventually uttered the words, I have a very high libido and I'm really ashamed of it. And they were like, so like, wow, you're so brave, because it is hard. Yeah, we do stigmatize that in this society. And it was like, yeah, I'm glad I don't feel like you guys are any more comfortable because of it. But if you just go to your friends and explain to them, look, this might sound a little bit weird, but I'm horny a lot and I don't know what to do with that. Or I have a difficulty connecting with my sexuality and I don't know what to do about that. Or I'm very ashamed and I find it really hard. And most of the time it is that exact shame that stops us from talking about it. But I do think, like, if you open the conversation, there will be other people who will meet you there and be like, you know what, you're right, I also find this difficult to talk about. But because you open that conversation, you make a place for it, and even though maybe the other person thinks of it differently, at least now there is a little bit of space where you can authentically talk about what's bothering you. I mean, this goes for a lot of emotions, but I feel like sexuality has such a large stigma around it that people don't even talk about it. And I feel like that's sad. You can talk about it, and you should talk about it. And even if you find it a little bit like, ooh, then definitely try talking about it. Because at the end of the day, mashing your genitals together is really not that special. It can be, of course. It can be really special and intimate. But I think also normalizing sex in conversation as a casual thing and taking it away from this status of this pornographized thing is much more helpful to, like, reconnecting with your sexuality, rather than just, like, sitting in the dark and jorking it to increasingly niche porn. I am pro porn, by the way. Let this be stated. I am pro porn, by the way, but vulnerability goes a long way. Now, in the next episode, I will talk a little bit more about trends such as what we deem hot, what people think is normal regarding sex, and also just this weird trend of people just having less sex in general, and how I technically think that it's just capitalism's fault. See you then!
Would I date you? Unlikely. Will I sleep with you? That depends. Will I let you put your acrylics down my throat in the back of the bathroom later? Absolutely. I might be a man, but I'm all femme for femme. And a big rouse to all the lesbians in the bar tonight. I know my core audience. And I also know that my transition is going really well because y'all keep calling me handsome. But please, call me cute when I'm gagging on your strap later, okay? If I'm a man and you're a lesbian, it doesn't matter as long as we're lesing out. To all the men and the masks in here, especially the bears in the audience, please know that if I look in your direction for just a second and then turn around, it's because I'm desperately trying to flirt. But as a power bottom, I only know one move. Showing ass.